right, we're getting ready to start. We're just sending a message out so everybody knows we are online. Okay, we're ready to go. Here we go. Okay, time for Caritamrta. All right. Jaya Randamadova, Jaya Kunjaviyari, Jaya Randamadova, Jaya Kunjaviyari, Gopijana Balaba, Jaya Girivarona. Jana Palama Gilivarurari Gilivarurari Yasoda Nandana Rajajana Nandana Yasoda Nandana Jaya Rajajana Nandana Charinayo Kunjabiyari Kunjabiyari Yamuna Tira Charinayo Kunjabiyari Kunjabiyari Randamadova Jana Pala Bada Giri Bada Giri Bada Bijana Pala Bada Giri Bada Giri Bada Soda Nandana Janaranda La Yasoda Nanda Janaranda Yamuna Tira Manachari Ayo Kunjabiyari Kunjabiyari Yamuna Tira Manachari Ayo Kunjabiyari Ayo Kunjabiyari Randamadova Prabhupada. Paramahansa Parvatikarya. Also Teta. Satashi Shimad. Divine Grace Savaya. Caritamrta Bhaktivedanta Goswami. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem say Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shidwaita Gadadha Shivasati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath Shai Mukund Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavanam Ki Jai, Maturidam Ki Jai, Jagannatha Swami Ki Jai, Yamunamai Ki Jai, Srimati Lasadevi Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Gaura Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is to Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Gaur Premananda, Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale, Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namani Namaste, Saraswati Devi, Gauravani Pacharani, Nivishesha, Shunyavadi Paschatya, Dejatarani, Somagana Timananda Shat. Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshuram Niditam Yena Tasmai Shigarave Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada, who so kindly opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge while I was blinded in the darkness of ignorance. So we're going to continue with our reading of Caitanya Caritamrta. We're almost finished with text 41, which is probably one of the longest purports, or has one of the longest purports of any of the texts in the Caitanya Charitamrita. This is the 5th chapter of the Adi Lila, text 41, and we are almost finished, so bear with us. So, Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya, Jaya Nityananda, Jaya Dvaita Chandra, Jaya Gaur Bhaktivinoda, Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya, Jaya Nityananda, Jaya Dvaita Chandra, Jaya Gaur Bhaktivinoda, Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya, Jaya Nityananda, Jaya Dvaita Chandra, Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. So here we go to share the screen. Okay, that's the screen we are going to share. Oh, I think I shared the wrong screen. That's a problem. Let's try once more. Sharing the screen. Here we go. There we go. Okay. So, I'm just going to check to see if we have the black marks on the screen like we had yesterday. Let me just check this to make sure we are not interrupted, because sometimes I like to keep little windows open on the screen in order to check on things. Give me 1 second to check on it. Check this to make sure we are not. Whoops. No, I'm getting. Let's see. Yes, we're still getting those black spots. Okay, anyway, that's life. Life in the material world. Okay, let's continue reading. And if anyone's interested in reading, they can raise their hands. Now, if you have the latest edition, whoops, please move this window. Okay. Yeah, if you have the latest edition of Zoom, the hand raising is actually in a different area. Anyway, probably most of you have the old edition of Zoom, in which the hand raising is under the participants. And if you've upgraded Zoom, then your hand raising will be under a different category. It'll be under, anyway, you'll see it. Whatever it is, don't worry. So if you're interested in reading, raise your hand. Raise your hand. All right. So let me continue reading. Sripad Ramanujacharya. So now we're talking about refuting Shankaracharya's commentaries. And so Sripad Ramanujacharya also refuted Shankaracharya's commentary. So Sripad Ramanujacharya has also refuted the arguments of Shankara in his own commentary on the Vedanta Sutra, which is known as the Sri Bhashya. That means Lakshmi's commentary. Srimad Shankaracharya, this is from Ramanujacharya, has tried to equate the Pancharatras with the philosophy of the atheist Kapila, and thus he has tried to prove that the Pancharatras contradict the Vedic injunctions. The Pancharatrikas state that the personality of Jiva called Sankarshan has emerged from Vasudeva, the supreme cause of all causes, that Prajna, the mind, has come from Sankarshan, and that Aniruddha, the ego, has come from Prajna. But one cannot say that the living entity Jiva takes birth or is created, for such a statement is against the injunction of the Vedas. As stated in the Kathopanishad, living entities as individual spirit souls can have neither birth nor death. All Vedic literature declares that the living entities are eternal. Therefore, when it is said that Sankarshan is Jiva, this indicates that he is the predominating deity of the living entities. Really important to understand. Similarly, Prajna is the predominating deity of the mind, and Aniruddha is the predominating deity of the ego. What is ego? The sense of the self, of who you are. There is the false ego and the real ego. And in the mind, there's the pure mind and the contaminated mind. And in the jiva, there's the pure jiva, Shuddha jiva. And there is the Bada jiva, the bound jiva to this material world. It has been said that Prajna, the mind, was produced from Sankarshan. But if Sankarshan were a living entity, this could not be accepted because a living entity cannot be the cause of the mind. The Vedic injunctions state that everything, including life, mind, and the senses, come from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is impossible for the mind to be produced by a living entity, for the Vedas state that everything comes from the absolute truth, the Supreme Lord. So he's pointing out the contradiction here. Because if someone says that from Vasudeva comes Sankarshan, who is the jiva, and then from Sankarshan comes the mind, who is Prajna, and then from Prajna comes the ego. That is crazy. Crazy. Because they're all personalities of Godhead, but each and every one of those expansions controls a different aspect of the nature of the living entities. That is the jiva, the mind, and the ego. Sankarsana, Prajna, and Aniruddha all have all the potent features of the absolute personality of Godhead. In other words, they couldn't have. Let's say if you take Sankarshan as the jiva, how can the jiva create the mind or an ego? I have never been able to. I'm a jiva, and I've never been able to create anyone's mind. I can't even cure people who have problems with their mind. So many times, dealing with devotees in ISKCON, we have to deal with devotees' minds. And 90% of the time, I'm not able to deal with the devotees' minds. So if I'm a jiva and I've created the minds, I can't even control anyone else's mind. I'm controlling my mind, hopefully. Manasa Krota Vegam, Jiva Vegam, Uddarapashta Vegam. But I can't control anyone else's mind. I try my best. And usually I send them to the neighboring psychiatrist to control their minds. Someone is sending me a message, so it better be important. So one thing I want to mention is please do not send messages Do not message unless there's something wrong. Don't send any message, because the only time I'm interested in a message when I am reading is if there is something wrong with the video or the audio, because it just interrupts the train of thought. So anyway, so usually I'm a jiva and I can't create a mind and I can't control the devotees' minds, so I just call for a psychiatrist, or not for my mind, of course, but for everybody else's mind. So anyway, therefore, these members of the quadruple manifestation are never to be considered ordinary living beings. Each of them is a plenary expansion of the absolute Godhead, and thus each is identical with the Supreme Lord in knowledge, opulence, energy, influence, prowess, and potencies. The evidence of the Pancharatras cannot be neglected. Only untrained persons who have not genuinely studied the Pancharatras think that the Pancharatras contradict the Shrutis regarding the birth or beginning of the living entity. In this connection, we must accept the verdict of Srimad Bhagavatam, which says, the absolute personality of Godhead, who is known as Vasudeva, and who is very affectionate toward his surrendered devotees, expands himself in quadruple forms, who are all subordinate to him and at the same time identical with him in all respects. That's a Dvaita, Achyuta, Anadir, Anantarupa, Ajam Purana, Purasham, Navayovanam Cha, Vedeshu Durlabam, Adurlabam, Atma Bhakto, Govindamadi Purasham, Tamaham Vajami. So, in other words, they're all identical with him, but they're subordinate in the sense that in those particular expansions, Krishna is exhibiting less of himself. Not everything is exhibited in what? Ete Chanksa Kalak Bhumsa. Krishna is tu Bhagavan Swayam. But in the expansions, Krishna is not exhibiting completely, okay? Nor intimately. Because only when Krishna appears as Swayam Bhagavan, Brajendra Nandana, does he play a flute, remember this? Does he have unexcelled beauty? Does he have intimate devotees and amazing pious times? So, the Osh Kara Sanghita states, the scriptures that recommend that Brahmanas worship the quadruple forms of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are called agamas, authorized Vedic literatures, and all Vaishnava literature. It is said that by worshiping these quadruple forms is as good as worshiping the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, who in his different expansions, complete in 6 opulences, can accept offerings from his devotees of the results of their prescribed duties. Worshipping the expansions for pastimes such as Nrsimha, Rama, Shesha, and Kurma promotes one to the worship of the Sankarshan quadruple. Quadruple means 4. That means Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. From that position, one is raised to the platform of worshipping Vasudeva, the Supreme Brahman. In the Poshkara Samhita, it is said, if one fully worships according to the regulative principles, one can attain the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva. It is to be accepted that Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha are as good as Lord Vasudeva, for they all have inconceivable power and can accept transcendental forms like Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. Forms like Vasudeva, sorry. I didn't see the period there. Sankarshana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha are never born, but they can manifest themselves in various incarnations before the eyes of the pure devotees. In other words, they're always eternally existent. This is the conclusion of all Vedic literature, that the Lord can manifest himself before his devotees by his inconceivable power is not against the teachings of the Pancharatras. Since Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha are respectively the predominating deities of all living entities, the total mind and the total ego, the designation of Sankarshana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha as jiva, mind, and ego are never contradictory to the statements of the scriptures. These terms identify these deities just as the terms sky and light sometimes identify the absolute Brahman. In the scriptures, these scriptures completely deny the birth or production of the living entity. In the Parama Samhita, it is described that material nature, which is used for others' purposes, is factually inert and always subject to transformation. It's called vikara. The field of material nature is the arena of the activities of fruitive actors, and since the material field is externally related with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it is also eternal. So in other words, the material world is eternal, but it's transformable. It's like a piece, sometimes I use the example, it's like a lump of silly putty. For those of you who don't know what silly putty is, silly putty is a type of clay that all the kids play with here in America, and it comes in a little container. Sometimes the containers are in the shape of an egg, but that doesn't mean it's an egg. So there's silly putty, and you take it out and you put it in different shapes, and it absorbs different things or picks up different images, and then you put it back. So the silly putty remains, but the shape or the shapes that it takes change according to time. The material nature is also eternal, but it changes sometimes. It becomes active when the living entity is injected into it, and sometimes it becomes inactive, and pradana means the inactive state, when the living entities and Krishna takes himself away from it. In every Samhita, the jiva, the living entity, has been accepted as eternal, and in the Pancharatras, the birth of the jiva is completely denied. Anything that is produced must also be annihilated. This is really powerful, because we sometimes hear from people who want to minimize Prabhupada, from people who want to challenge Prabhupada's authority, from people who want to challenge what Prabhupada said, that they say the jiva was born. And these are people outside the movement who attempt to minimize Prabhupada with the intention of destroying people's faith or minimizing people's faith and getting people to join their society. It is insidious. So here it is completely shown that the jiva is never produced, even by Sankarshan. Sankarshan, according to Ramanujacharya, the Acharyas, is the predominating deity of the jivas. He doesn't create the jivas. Anything, let me read this again. Anything that is produced must also be annihilated. Therefore, if we accept the birth of the living entity, we also have to accept his annihilation. And of course, Bhagavad Gita, simple philosophy. Najayate, mriyate, va kadachan. What does that mean? Not birth, nor death. Ever. Va kadachan. Nayam bhutva, bhavita va nabhuyaha. Nor does he ever cease to be. This is Bhagavad Gita. But we have people who just like to twist the philosophy for their nefarious political gains and create confusion amongst devotees. It's amazing. It's simply amazing. The soul was never created. It didn't burst out of the Tatashta Shakti. It didn't burst out of Sankarshan. It didn't burst out of Mahashankarshan. It's eternally existent. And if you don't like it, tough. Then join. Then just become a Christian then. That's fine. Just be honest. Okay? become a Christian. The soul was born, according to them, at the time, well, some of them at the time of birth, some of them at the time of conception, depending whether you like contraception, whether you like abortion, depends on how you define things according to your own sense gratification. And then, somehow or other, for many of them, the soul is the same as the body. Yuck! And at the time of judgment, those bones shall rise again. In other words, come out of the coffin. It's scary. It's like some horror movie that you've seen when you were young, and you couldn't sleep for 2 weeks after seeing the bones rising again. Oh my God. It's like, phew. So anyway, so let people become Christians or, some other religion where they believe the soul and the body are the same or the soul was created. That's fine, but that's not what Sripad Ramanujacharya says. That's not what Prabhupada says, not what Jiva Goswami says, not what Rupa Goswami says in his Laghu Bhagavatamrita, or Bhaktivinoda Thakur says. But, people have some ulterior purposes. And those purposes become mixed with their presentation of the philosophy. I often say that behind every single philosophical argument, there is a psychological reason, what we call a need, if you take my course. There's a need. So, anyway, Prabhupada's presentation is perfect because he's following in the footsteps of the acharyas, not someone who just screwed something out of his vacant balloon on his head. Okay, sorry about that. Since the Vedic literature say, sorry I got started on that bit. I don't like politics or people using philosophy to engage in political stuff because to work out their own emotional problems. If you engage in politics, that's another thing. Then you're emotional, just like we're seeing in the United States right now. There's people who are emotional and stupid. But philosophy should be done without any ulterior purpose. Certainly not a political purpose. The purpose should be to ascertain the truth. Not simply to defeat someone in an argument, win someone over, make followers, God. But since the Vedic literatures say that a living entity is eternal, one should not think the living being to be produced at a certain time. In the beginning of the Panama Samhita, it is definitely stated that the face of material nature is constantly changeable, which is what I talked about, vikara. It's mutable. Bhagavad Gita says the same thing. Therefore, beginning, annihilation, and all such terms are applicable only to the material nature. So this beginning, it's not the material nature begins, or it's really annihilated, but the forms that it takes begin and are annihilated. But the energy itself is eternal, just like we study in science, that a matter and energy can neither be created nor destroyed. They can transform energy to matter and matter to energy. And anyway, matter is energy according to the Vedas, and energy is matter. Anyway, considering all these points, one should understand that Shankaracharya's statement that Shankarshan is born as a jiva is completely against the Vedic statements. His assertions are completely refuted by the above arguments. In this connection, the commentary of Sridhar Swami on Srimad Bhagavatam 3, 3rd canto, 1st chapter, text 34, is very helpful. For a detailed refutation of Shankaracharya's arguments, attempting to prove Sankarshan an ordinary living being, one may refer to Srimad Sudarshanacharya's commentary on the Shribhasha, which is known as the Shruta Prakashika. The original quadruple forms, Krishna, Baladev, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha, expand into another quadruple, second quadruple, which is present in the Vaikuntha planets of the spiritual sky. Therefore, the quadruple forms in the spiritual sky are the second piece. second manifestation of the original quadruple in Dwarka. Got it? As explained above, Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Adiruddha are all changeless, transcendental, plenary expansions of the Supreme Lord who have no relation to the material modes. The Sankarshan form in the second quadruple is not only a representation of Balaram, but also the original cause of the causal ocean, where Karanadakshai Vishnu, that's Mahavishnu, lies asleep, breathing out the seeds of innumerable universes and glancing at all the universes as he's sleeping. Saikshata. In the spiritual sky, there is a spiritual creative energy technically called Shuddha Sattva, which is pure spiritual energy that sustains all the Vaikuntha planets with the full opulences of knowledge, wealth, prowess, etc. All these actions of Shuddha Sattva display the potencies of Mahasankarshan, who is the ultimate reservoir of all individual living entities who are suffering in the material world. He doesn't create the living entities, but they sometimes reside in him at the time of the cosmic dissolution. When the cosmic creation is annihilated, the living entities who are indestructible by nature. This is exactly what I just said. I'm not making this up. Rest in the body of Maha Sankarshan. Sankarshan is therefore sometimes called the total jiva. That's why we do come out of Sankarshan at the time of the cosmic creation. As spiritual sparks, the living entities have the tendency to be inactive in the association of the material energy, just as sparks of fire have the tendency to be extinguished as soon as they leave the fire. In other words, because we are not in touch with the spiritual energy, or at least we're covered up so we're not so much in touch, we become very inactive. That's why we sleep so much. Sleep and are influenced by ignorance. People love to take intoxication. Christmas, New Year's becomes a time for getting intoxicated. We have a giant liquor store, not in the temple, here in Hillsborough, and it's the most popular store in the whole area. The spiritual nature of the living being can be rekindled, however, in association with the Supreme Being. Because a living being can appear either in matter or in spirit, the jiva is called a marginal potency. That's us. It's like, according to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the line of demarcation between the shore and the ocean. Doesn't actually exist. You're either in the shore or the ocean, but there's a line. You can't be really on the line. You have to be on one side of the line or the other. Of course, I understand you can have 1 foot in the water, 1 foot in dry land. But as far as if you're totally, you can't be totally on a line, because the line is an imaginary line. It's a difference between matter and spirit, or between the shore and the ocean. Sankarshan is the origin of Karana Vishnu. Karana Vishnu means Mahavishnu is the original form who creates the universe. He breathes out. And that Sankarshan is but a what? Plenary expansion of Sri Nityananda Ram. So in other words, just to reiterate, you have Krishna. And if you don't know who Krishna is, you're in the wrong class here. You have, after Krishna, Balaram. And if you don't know who Balaram is, I think you need to go back to kindergarten. And then Prajuna. And in Krishna's pastimes, Prajuna is Krishna's son. And he manifests Cupid too. And then you have Aniruddha, who is Krishna's great-grandson. Not great-grandson, grandson, sorry. Sankarshan is a plenary expansion of Sri Nityananda Ram. So Nityananda Ram is none different than Balaram, Krishna, Caitanya Mahaprabhu. Got it? Get it. Okay, after berating everybody for the last 10 minutes. Let's see who is on the hit parade right now. Okay, Cash, you're allowed to unmute right now. You can read.
Please accept my humble obeisance, Gurudev. All words to Srila Prabhupada.
Are you reading? Let's see, maybe that. I can't hear anything.
Oh, please accept my humble obeisance, Gurudev.
Okay.
All glories to
I can
Srila.
hear you now, so why don't you read, Rakesh?
ताना ये रामे रूप महासंकर्षण चित्त शक्ति आश्रय तीन हो कारण कारण
Continue.
they are, yes, there it is. They are personal features of Balaram called Mahasankarshna is the shelter of the spiritual energy. He is the primary cause, the cause of all causes. चित शक्ति इलास एक शुद्ध सत्व नाम शुद्ध सत्व माया यथा वैकुंठादि धाम. One variety of the pastimes of the spiritual energy is described as pure goddess, Visuddha Sattva. It comprises all the abodes of Vaikuntha. Sad Vidheswarya Tahana Sakal Chinmay Sankarshner Vibhuti Sab Janila Nischay. The six attributes are all spiritual. Know for certain that they are all manifestations of the opulence of Sankarshna. जीव नाम तथास्तक्य एक शक्ति है महासंकर्षण सब जीवेर आश्रय. There is one marginal potency known as the Jiva. Mahasankarshan is the shelter of all Jivas. Yana het Visvotapati Yanahat Pralay Se Purse Sankarshna Samasray. Sankarshna is the original center of the Purusa, from whom the world is created and in whom it is dissolved. सर्वश्रेय सर्वद्भूत ऐश्वर्य आपर अनंत कहते नारे महिमा यानहार. Sankarshna is the shelter of everything. He is wonderful in every respect, and his opulences are infinite. Every Anant cannot even Anant cannot describe his glory. Surya Visuddha Sattva Sankarshna Naam Tino Yanra Ansa Sai Nityanand Ram. The Sankarshna, who is transcendental pure goodness, is partial expansion of Nityananda Balram. Atma Sloker Kail Sankespe Vivarn Navam Sloker Arth Suna Diya Man. I have briefly explained the 8 verses. Now please listen with attention as I explain the 9th verse. Maya Bharta Maya Bhartajad Sangharshang Sete Sakshat Karambodhi Madhye Yashe Kamsha Sri Puman Adi Devas Tam Sri Nityanand Ramam Papadde. I offer my full obeisances onto the feet of Sri Nityanand Ram, whose partial representation called Karna Dakshay Vishnu, lying on the Karna Oceana, is the original Purusa, the master of the illusory energy, and the shelter of all the universe. Vaikuntha Bahire Yai Jyotirmay Dham, Tahar Bahire Karnarvan Nam. Outside the Vaikuntha planet is the impersonal Brahma effulgence, and beyond the effulgence is the current oceans or causal oceans. The impersonal glowing effulgence known as impersonal Brahma is the outer space of the Vaikuntha planet in the spiritual sky. Beyond that impersonal Brahman is the great causal ocean, which lies between the material and spiritual sky. The material nature is byproduct of the causal ocean. Karnodakshi Vishnu, who lies on the causal ocean, creates the universe merely by glancing upon material nature. Therefore, Krishna personally has nothing to do with the material creation. The Bhagavad Gita confirms that Lord glances over material nature and thus she produces the many material universes. Neither Krishna in Goloka nor Narayana in the Vaikuntha comes directly in contact with the material creation. They are completely aloof from the material energy. It is a function of Mahasankarshna in the form of Karno Dhakchai Vishnu to glance over the material creation, which is situated beyond the limits of the causal ocean. Material nature is connected with the personality of Godhead by his glance over her and nothing more. It is said she is impregnated by the energy of his glance. The material energy Maya never even touches the causal ocean, for the Lord glance focuses upon her from a great distance away. The glancing power of the Lord agitates the entire cosmic energy, and its action begins at once. This indicates that matter, however powerful she may be, has no power by herself. Her activity begins by the grace of the Lord, and then the entire cosmic creation is manifested in a systematic way. The example of a woman's conception can help us understand this subject to a certain extent. The mother is passive, but the father puts his energy within the mother, and thus she conceives. She supplies the ingredient for the birth of the child in her womb. Similarly, the Lord activates material nature, which then supplies the ingredient for cosmic development. Material nature has two different phases. The aspect called Pradhan supplies the material ingredients for cosmic development, and the aspect called Maya causes the manifestation of her ingredient, which are temporary like foam in the ocean. In reality, the temporary manifestation of the material nature are originally caused by spiritual glance of the Lord. The personality of Godhead is the direct or remote cause of creation, and the material nature is the indirect or immediate cause. Materialistic scientists, puffed up by the magical changes that their so-called invention have brought about cannot see the real potential of Godhead behind matter. Therefore, the jugglery of science is gradually leading people to a godless civilization at the cost of goal of human life. Having missed the goal of life, materialists run self-sufficient by the grace of God, thus creating a colossal hoax in the name of civilization. They create an imbalance in the natural self-sufficiency of
Okay, material nature. Okay, yeah, we'll end here for you, and I just wanted to explain some things about the creation. Um, the material nature is inert, that is, the pradhan, which is described there, means the ingredient cause of the material nature. Now, at the time of the creation, you have the Mahavishnu, which we described before, but I'm just going to do a little greater depth about it. The Mahavishnu glances at the material nature, and that glance is known as Shambhu or Lord Shiva. And then Lord Shiva consorts with Maya, who's an expansion of the goddess of fortune, but for dealing with the material world, just like Lord Shiva is an expansion of Krishna for dealing with the material world, or an expansion of the Mahavishnu. Anyway, and they consort, and Lord Shiva implants the living entities within the pradhana, and the pradhana takes shape as all the different universes and everything that's happening, the stars, everything, the sun, the stars, the moon, the planets, and everything like that. It all happens because the injection of the Lord's potency into the womb of the material nature, which is what Prabhupada is saying here. Okay, so now we'll allow someone else. Let's see, who am I going to allow? We're going to try to pick people who don't normally read. Oh, Nalini Kant, why don't you read right now, beginning with to think of material nature as the all in all? You have to unmute yourself. We cannot hear you. Haribol. Anyway, you had a hand up. you're going to lose your opportunity. Let me just unmute yourself. Try to unmute yourself.
Okay. Hare Krishna, Gurudev, Dandam, Pranam, all glories.
Okay, go ahead.
To think of material nature as all in all, not knowing the original cause, is ignorance. Lord Chaitanya appeared to dissipate this darkness of ignorance by igniting the spark of spiritual life that can, by his causeless mercy, enlighten the entire world. To explain how Maya acts by Krishna's power, the author of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrta gives the example that an iron rod in a fire, although it is not fire because red hot and acts like fire itself, similarly, all the actions and reactions of material nature are not actually the work of material nature, but are actions and reactions of the energy of the Supreme Lord manifested through matter. The power of electricity is transmitted through the medium of copper, but this does not mean that the copper is electricity. The power is generated at a powerhouse under the control of an expert living being. Similarly, being all the jugglery of the natural laws is an natural laws is a great living being who is a person like mechanical engineer in the powerhouse. It is by his intelligence that the entire cosmic creation moves in systematic way. The modes of nature that directly cause material actions are also originally activated by Narayana. A simple example will explain how this is so. When a potter manufactures a pot from earth, the potter's will, his tools, and the potter himself are remote causes of the pot, but the potter is chief cause. Similarly, Narayana is chief cause of all material creations, and material energy supplies the ingredients of matter. Therefore, without Narayana, all other causes are useless, just as the potter's wheel and the tools are useless without the potter himself. Since the materialistic scientists ignore the personality of Godhead, it is as if they were concerned with the potter's wheel and its rotations, the potter's tools, and the ingredients for the pots, but had no knowledge of potter himself. Therefore, modern science has created an imperfect godless civilization that is in gross ignorance of the ultimate cause. Scientific advancement should have a great goal to attain, and that great goal should be personality of Godhead. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said that after conducting research for many births, great men of knowledge who stress the importance of experimental thought can know the personality of Godhead, who is cause of all causes. When one knows him perfectly, one surrenders unto him and then becomes Mahatma. वैकुंठ वैकुंठा बेदिया एक आचे जल निधि अनंत अपरा तारा नाहिका अवधि. Surrounding Vaikunta is a mass of water that is endless, unfathomed, and unlimited. Vaikuntera prithivya adi sakala sinmaya Mayika Bhutera Tati Janmanahi Haya. The earth, water, fire, air, and ether of Vaikunta are all spiritual. Material elements are not found there. Chinmaya Jale Sei Paramakarana Yara Ekakana Ganga Patita Pavana. The water of Karana ocean, which is original cause, is therefore spiritual. The sacred Ganges, which is but a drop of it, purifies the fallen souls. Seita Karanarnave Sei Sankarshana Apanara Eka Amshe Karena Saena. In that ocean lies one plenary portion of Lord Sankarshana. Mahat Shrashta Purusha Tino Jagat Karana Adya Avatara Kare Mayaya Iksana. He is known as first Purusha, the creator of total material energy. He, the cause of universes, the first incarnation, casts his glance over Maya. Maya Shakti Rahe Karanabdira Bahire Karana Samudra Maya Para Site Nare. Maya Shakti resides outside the ocean of Karana. Maya cannot touch its water. Seita Mayara Dui Vida Avastiti Jagatera Upadana Apradhana Prakriti. Maya has two varieties of existence. One is called Pradhana or Prakriti. It supplies the ingredients of material world. Purport. Maya, the external energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is divided into two parts. Maya is the cause and the ingredient of cosmic manifestations. As the cause of cosmic manifestation, she is known as Maya. And as the agent supplying the ingredients of cosmic manifestation, she is known as Pradhana. An explicit description of these divisions of external energy is given in Srimad Bhagavatam 11.24.1 to 4. Elsewhere in Srimad Bhagavatam 10.63.26, the ingredients and the cause of material cosmic manifestations are described as follows. Kalu Daivam Karma Jiva Swabhavo Dravyam Kshetram Prana Atma Vikaraha Tat Sangato Bijaroha Pravahas Twana Mayaisa Tana Nishedham Prapadye. O my Lord, time, activity, providence, and nature are four parts of causal aspects, Maya, of the external energy. The conditioned vital force, the subtle material ingredients called the Dravya, and the material nature, which is the field of activity where the false ego acts as the soul, as well as the 11 senses and 5 elements, earth, water, fire, air, ether, which are 16 ingredients of body. These are ingredients aspect of Maya. The body is generated from the activity and activity is generated from the body. Just as a tree is generated from a seed that is generated from a tree. This reciprocal cause and effect is called Maya. My dear Lord, you can save me from the cycle of cause and effect. I worship your lotus feet. Although the living entity is primarily related to the causal portion of Maya, is nevertheless conducted by the ingredients of Maya. Three forces work in the causal portion of Maya: knowledge, desire, and activity. The material ingredients are manifestations of Maya as Pradhan. In other words, when the three qualities of Maya are in the dormant stage, they exist as Prakriti, Avyakta, or Pradhana. The word Avyakta, referring to non-manifest, is another name of Pradhana. In the Avyakta stage, material nature is without varieties. Varieties are manifested by Pradhana portion of Maya. The word Pradhana is therefore more important than Avyakta or Prakriti.
Okay, yeah, stop there and then we'll take questions.
Thank you, Guru.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll enable all of you to ask questions right now. Okay, you can all officially unmute yourself. Who wants to ask a question first?
I do, Srila Gurudev.
Okay, Jagat. Let Jagat. Okay, go ahead.
Pancharatra says that Sankarshan is the Jiva principle, Pradyumna is the mind principle, and Aniruddha is ego. But Bhagavatam and Rupa Goswami say that Sankarshan is Jiva and ego, and Pradyumna is intelligence, and Aniruddha is mind. So how do we deal with the discrepancy?
Well, it's not really a discrepancy. They're all the same person. So basically, everything's right. They can, you know, when you're talking about Sankarshan, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, or Vasudev, they're all the same person, and they can all act in different circumstances to control the mind, and ultimately Vasudev controls all of them. So I guess it's just different circumstances or different times when you have Pradyumna or Aniruddha or Sankarshan doing different things. But ultimately, they're all the same. You can actually say Vasudeva is also the jiva, the mind, and the ego. I guess it just may be different angles of vision of looking at the same thing. I mean, that's the only way I could explain what is apparently, not apparently different, but it's not really different because it's all the same person. You can actually say, Krishna controls my mind. So basically, when you're talking about the quadruple expansions, you can say Vasudeva does it all. So just different angles of looking at the same thing. So, good question. So who else has a question?
Hare Krishna, Gurudev.
Lila Kant, do you have a question? Yeah.
Thank you, Gurudev. Gurudev, why Shankaracharya had to present false philosophy to re-establish Vedas again?
Why? Well, there's a whole history that Lord Buddha took people away from the Vedas because people were using the Vedas for the wrong purposes, such as making money, cow slaughter, exploiting people, establishing, the caste system. And so Lord Buddha, he sort of established the equality between everyone, which was really good. And he taught people, he opposed the Vedas. Lord Buddha never really taught voidism, although his followers do. If you read his sermons, which I'm not sure if we have an exact copy of his sermons, but at least there's one particular sermon called the Sermon at Deer Park, which is generally known by most Buddhists as the Sermon of No Soul. Lord Buddha never says that there's no soul. Lord Buddha primarily dealt with the psychological aspects of liberation from the material world. For example, the Four Noble Truths, such as what? The material world is suffering, suffering is caused by attachment, give up the attachment, the suffering goes away, and the way to do that is the Eightfold Path, right living, right thinking, etc., taught by Buddha. So if you really examine the original Buddha's teachings, there's no metaphysics there at all. Then later on, people got into speculating on metaphysics, and it turned into be more or less voidist at that particular point because Buddha never really talked about metaphysics, so all they were left with was a void. And so, but Buddha, his main attraction for people was that they were revolting against this caste system in the Brahmanism. And Jains, it was actually the same thing for the Jains and other members of society who just left to go to the woods. So therefore, Buddhism became known as a nihilistic or a voidist philosophy.
Yes.
So Shankaracharya, anyway, and people accepted Buddhism. I mean, naturally, if you were being exploited in the name of the Vedic literature, which most people were, you'd probably reject the Vedic literature. I mean, for example, sometimes we find that people have an improper understanding of the Vedic literatures and consider the Vedic literatures to be chauvinistic. They may reject the Vedic literatures because of their misunderstanding of the Vedic literatures. So anyway, so people rejected the Vedic literatures. So in order to bring them full circle back to the Vedic literatures, not quite full circle, half circle, then Shankaracharya had to teach something that was called like covered Buddhism, not quite Buddhism, but impersonalism, which is very similar to Buddhism. You have Nirvishesha, Shunyavadi. And then to get them to accept the authenticity of the Vedas again. Because if he had tried to bring them back to the Vedas with the personal understanding, when they weren't ready to accept the personal understanding, they would not have been able to accept it, and he would not have been able to drive the Buddhists out of India, which he did quite nicely. Because he was able to show that, hey, we got the same philosophy as the Buddhists do. And actually, really, it's not the philosophy of Buddha, but anyway, it was the philosophy that Buddhists thought they were following. Anyway, he said, we have the same philosophy that the Buddhists do, and it's in our Vedic literatures. Hey, isn't that cool? So therefore, let's come back to India, because Buddha's from India also. But let's come back to our original Vedic literatures. Isn't that cool? It's been there all along in the Vedas. Impersonalism and voidism, Haribol. And so, anyway, he brought them back to the Vedic literatures. And then it was up to the great acharyas like Ramanujacharya, Vishnuswami, and other great acharyas to defeat Shankaracharya's philosophy and bring them back full circle to the proper understanding of the Vedic literatures. Does that make sense?
Yes, Gurudev. Thank you very much, Gurudev.
Shankaracharya had a mission, and his mission was to bewilder the atheists and bring them back to the Vedas so that they could be brought fully back later on. And to get rid of the Buddhists, or the so-called Buddhists.
Yeah.
He drove them out of India. I mean, you'll find some Buddhists in India now, but at a particular time, Buddhism was the religion of India under the Emperor Ashoka. You've heard about the Emperor Ashoka?
Yes, Gurudev.
He made Buddhism like, that was the religion. It was like the Church of India. You had to be a Buddhist. And he became a Buddhist when he realized one time he was attacking Orissa, and he saw all the horrendous carnage that was there in his attacks of Orissa, and he became so disgusted by the carnage, by the violence and everything, that he took up Buddhism, and then he spread Buddhism everywhere. So that's the Emperor Ashoka. He's famous.
Yes.
He's famous in India. You actually even have his insignias on what used to be on some of the Indian currency, isn't it?
Not sure, Gurudev.
Yeah. There was some
Yes,
sort
Gurudev.
of some insignia from it, isn't it?
Yes, it's Gurudev. Yes, I read about it a lot in the history. Yes.
Yeah.
We had
So it was on
chapters.
Indian currency. This figure that's on the Indian currency is from the Emperor Ashoka.
Oh.
So you're from India, aren't you, Nalinikant?
Yes, but I didn't know that insignia is from.
You never learned about Indian currency?
I looked at it, but I didn't know that it's from Ashoka, King Ashoka coming.
Yeah, that's from King Ashoka. That interesting insignia is actually from the Emperor Ashoka.
Okay.
It's interesting. You're from India, and I'm from New York, and I know these things. Oh my God, I'm embarrassed. Just go back to where you came from. Yeah.
Okay, Gurudev.
All right. I'm just joking.
Yes.
I'm joking.
Thank you, Gurudev.
All right.
So, Gurudev, that was need that time. That's why he had to preach this impersonalism.
Yeah, it was needed to bring people back to the Vedas, so that later on the great acharyas like Ramanujacharya, and then of course ultimately Caitanya Mahaprabhu, who was able to teach the philosophy of Chincha Beta Beta Tattva. Ramanujacharya's philosophy of Vishishtadvaita is very close to Chincha Beta Beta Tattva philosophy.
People in India, those who follow Mayavad, like one of my cousin, he I mean, it was very difficult for me to for him to accept what our acharya says, that how he mispresented the Vedas in personalism. That was a need. So answer should be given as based on the what Ramanujacharya says and other acharya says.
Yeah. Even if he doesn't accept the Hare Krishna movement, he should look at Ramanujacharya, Vishnuswami, and Madhvacharya and others who dealt. I mean, if he's intelligent, he should read the commentaries of these great acharyas. Nimbarka, all these great acharyas, they refuted Shankaracharya. he may not accept the Gaudiyas for one reason or other.
Yes.
Because generally people, at least in South India, they accept the South Indian acharyas.
Yes.
If you bring in a North Indian acharya, they say, who is that? We're the South Indian, we're the bona fide personalities. We're the bona fide Vedic personalities. Because North India, anyway, you got this whole thing between South India and North India, where in North India they speak Hindi. In South India, in many places, they refuse to learn Hindi
Yes.
or speak Hindi. They'd rather speak English.
Yes.
They just say, Hindi, what's that? Ugh. But English, they say, oh, English, very nice. Or, Telugu or Tamil or something like that.
Yes.
That's South India. South India, so the people in South India think, we're the real Aryans. Those people in North India, they're just a bunch of whatever.
Yeah.
It's like a discrimination. And of course, in America, it's the opposite. In America, the people in the North think the people in the South are out to lunch. They're a bunch of hokies. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that so much because they voted for the wrong person in the election. So anyway, let me not get into politics. Today is obviously the wrong day if I value my life. So one other.
Thank you, Gurudev.
Who else wants to ask a question? No one else.
Hare Krishna, Gurudev.
Haribol,
accept-
so you have a
Please
question?
accept my humble obeisances. Yes. What is Pancharatras?
Pancharatra, the Pancharatra are the Pancha means 5 actually, but Pancharatras are the Vidi. Pancharatra ki Vidi is the regulations for, let's say, deity worship, sadhana, and all those things like that. There's different paths. There's the Pancharatra ki Vidi, and there's Bhagavat Vidi, and also Vedic Vidi or paths. So in the Bhagavat Vidi, we have chanting and hearing and reading of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Pancharatra ki Vidi, we have deity worship, primarily deity worship, and the rules and regulations for putting on tilak, different rituals like that. And Prabhupada described that in the Krishna conscious movement, we follow both vidis or both paths, a Pancharatra ki Vidi and Bhagavat Vidi. Now, the rules for Pancharatra ki Vidi are contained in the Narada Pancharatra and other Pancharatras, which are considered part of the Vedic literatures. So there are rules for the Pancharatra ki Vidi. So does that explain that?
Yes, Gurudev. Thank you. I have one question.
Yeah.
Is Sankarshana, Mahavishnu, and Narayana are all the same?
Yes. Vasudeva,
Okay.
Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha are all the same person, but just exhibiting themselves differently according to different circumstances, simultaneously or simultaneously. Yeah. There's no difference between all these persons, between Krishna, Balaram, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, the third expansion or portions of plenary portions. There's no difference between all these Swamsa expansions of the Lord. They're all the same person, exhibiting himself differently in different circumstances. Simultaneously, inconceivably. That's the nature of God. And if you don't understand it, that's okay. You're not supposed to understand it. You're supposed to, at least theoretically, you can understand it. But how a person can be doing different things simultaneously, like Krishna was in 16,188 houses with 16,108 wives and children and everything like that, How Krishna did it, I don't know, but he's God. He can do anything he wants. That's the nature of the Supreme Lord. Okay, so we have to end now. Thank you very much.